I think in the sense that he is denigrating the military. That's been a consistent theme for President Trump on the campaign trail and now in office. Blaming them without evidence. Again, that's irresponsible. These are hardworking men and women who are also tough jobs to get. These highly specialized jobs, flying helicopters and such. Now, if there was a mistake made, that's going to be uncovered. There's an investigation going on right now. We should just know these facts before we allocate blame. And the real goal here is to figure out what went wrong and how do we avoid this happening again. That's the kind of tone I think we need right now from the President of the United States. And we are just not getting that kind of leadership.
Chiraag, if we can start with a thought from you on what leadership should look like at a time like this. What do you expect from a President of the United States?
At a time of tragedy like this, when so many people have lost their lives and so many families are affected, I think the president needs to come out and express empathy, try to bring people together and be honest and straightforward about what we know right now, what the government knows, and what is going to happen to try to uncover the truth.
That is interesting because I think people accept that there has to be that element of could we call that traditional leadership? One thing that our listeners were saying to us on Friday's program was that they admired in some ways the authenticity of Trump. So he bounced straight from the presidential bit of delivering information that sadly nobody had survived this crash, and then channeled anger at how this could happen. Did that feel like an authentic response to you?
Yeah, I think that part of his response was positive, right? We should be upset about this. We all are. I mean, I live 10 minutes from where this happened. I know people, 1 degree of separation from people who lost their lives in this crash. And I'm angry and I'm shocked and I am just incredibly sad for the families and the pain that they're going through right now. And that is something that our leaders should be expressing. And I think we did get that from Donald Trump. Stylistically, I think he's a plain talker. He's authentic in that way. But he immediately began scapegoating people, in terms of talking about diversity efforts. And so while we got straight talk from him, it wasn't the truth. And that's the problem. That's where things go off the rail. He's a plain language communicator, but he's not communicating accurate information or the truth. And he's, in fact, demonizing people who don't deserve it.
He talked without giving evidence about the lowering standards of hiring for air traffic controllers in the Federal Aviation Administration during the Biden and Obama presidencies and how that may have been a factor in the disaster. I note that you led the implementation of President Biden's executive order on racial equity and support for undeserved communities. And I'm not sure if these things are directly connected, but certainly it feels like, Chiraag, you have knowledge of how an administration works in this sort of way. Do DEI policies deserve any scrutiny in this conversation about the crash?
Let me start with this. I think it's a problem when a person's first reaction to a plane crash is it must be a Black or a disabled person's fault. I think it's a catastrophe when that person is the president of the United States. That's what we saw here. It was immediately, without any evidence, which he acknowledged. I don't have any evidence, but I have strong opinions of this. Started blaming people, and immediately went to, we lowered standards, we let people in who weren't qualified for the jobs. That is absolutely false. I want to be really clear about this. President Biden's efforts, previous presidents, even President Trump in his first term, all the efforts at diversity were about increasing recruitment, trying to broaden the pool of applicants, and trying to remove barriers and discrimination in the process. Barriers that shouldn't exist. So, we know that people with disabilities generally, when they apply for jobs, are immediately 26% less likely to get an interview if they disclose that they have a disability. And look, there's some jobs that people just aren't qualified to do. But the point of our laws against disability discrimination is that if you're qualified for a job, the fact that you have an unrelated disability shouldn't factor into the analysis. Now, when it comes to the FAA and air traffic controllers, there's no lowering of standards that went on at all. Again, trying to broaden the pool and encourage people to apply to the broad variety of jobs that exist at FAA. And the president, has nothing that he can point to. If you look at the memo he signed after he was, after he went and gave that press conference, he couldn't point to anything, that showed that any unqualified person was hired by the FAA at all, let alone that any unqualified person was involved in this incident. So I think this is just completely invented out of whole cloth, and it's an attempt to shift blame to people, who are easy targets.
These are highly skilled jobs. Air traffic control is incredibly stressful. It's incredibly intense. We know that. And we also know that there has been something of a nationwide issue in recruitment, generally speaking, for jobs in air traffic control across the US over the last number of years. That's not a new thing. And indeed, in this case, there actually may have been a shortage of staff by the sound of some of the early reporting. To what extent, in your view, would Trump's anti-DEI stance be harmful for jobs like this? Is there a case here where he could harm the employment, I'm going to say prospects, but trying to fill these gaps that are essential to fill? Is that the outcome of a war on DEI?
I think that's a serious risk. I mean, let's start where you started, which is this is a real issue. We do have a shortage of air traffic controllers in the federal government. And this is a long-standing issue. It was true during President Trump's first term. It's been true for a long time. And it was a priority for us in the Biden administration. And I want folks to know that President Biden hired more air traffic controllers in 2024 than in any previous year in the previous 10 years. So we were making progress in filling these jobs. The point that you make, if we're going after folks or blaming folks, I think it could have a serious deterrent effect. The point is, you want people to want to work in the federal government. You want qualified people to apply and be willing to do the job. These are tough jobs. They're stressful. They're long hours. There's a rigorous process to get hired in the first place. And if we zoom out and just look at what President Trump has done in the first couple of weeks of being in office, it has been an all-out war on federal employees, firing people who have civil service protection, you can't actually just fire, but he's doing it and saying, I welcome the lawsuits, reassigning people, moving loyalists into those positions. So right now, the top qualification to get a job in the Trump administration is being loyal to Trump, being willing to implement his agenda, even if it would break the law. That does not make for an effective government. And I think it will deter people. People will know that they will not have civil service protection. In fact, if they get into these jobs, because they could be fired because Trump or Elon Musk or one of their lackeys decide that they're not loyal enough personally to the president.
What do you make of the claim, Chiraag, that some make that DEI, as it's being implemented, means there is a lower standard of competence in jobs across the board, not necessarily specifically air traffic control in this context, but that the policy itself, the idea itself, the principle itself might not be a bad idea, but the way it's being implemented means workplaces feel forced to employ certain people over others, and that lowers standards in the workplace?
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that at all. I mean, I understand the concern, and I suppose it's theoretically possible. But we just got done talking about a situation where we need to hire more people, right? So if there are qualified people out there, they should be getting those jobs in terms of air traffic controllers. If the folks aren't getting the jobs, it's because they're not meeting the standards that are set. And then just generally, I think this is a talking point, especially, it's a big one for President Trump. It's there's a scapegoating that goes on, a way to pin the blame on folks and say it's their fault, not the fault of the administration when something goes wrong. I just haven't seen any evidence that standards have in fact been lowered. And I think that's where the responsibility lies on those who are making this argument to point to some evidence. We've got to be working based on facts here. And if someone brought those facts forward, I'd be really interested and willing to consider them.
One final question as well, because I'm obviously distant from how an administration operates, but I'm quite intrigued by Trump's approach to the FAA and indeed to the military in all of this. He's spoken about how the helicopter was flying too high. Again, he's not provided any evidence to back up that claim, but that is the kind of his latest comment in all of this. And one of the things I can't get away from is this is a president who is outing, if I can put it like that, without evidence, federal agencies and the military. And I just wonder if that is a healthy way to conduct policy making, and fundamentally a presidential term.
I think in the sense that he is denigrating the military, that's been a consistent theme for President Trump on the campaign trail and now in office. blaming them without evidence, again, that's irresponsible. These are hardworking men and women who are also tough jobs to get. These highly specialized jobs, flying helicopters and such. Now, if there was a mistake made, that's going to be uncovered. There's an investigation going on right now. We should just know these facts before we allocate blame. And the real goal here is to figure out what went wrong and how do we avoid this happening again. That's the kind of tone I think we need right now from the President of the United States. And we are just not getting that kind of leadership.
Chiraag, really good to speak to you. Thank you ever so much. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for your attention to this.